Well, there are wine lovers, there are wine connoisseurs, and then there are those with perhaps the most desperate love of the grape of all, the wine writer. Imagine the job description. You travel the world from southern Italy to Australia, Germany to Argentina, Niagara to the Mediterranean, all in search of the best glass of vino. Natalie McLean is one of those writers traipsing around the world looking not only for the best wine, but at the best price. Her first book was called Red, White, and Drunk All Over. Her latest is called Unquenchable, a tipsy quest for the world's best bargain wines. Natalie joins us in studio. Good morning, Natalie.
Hi, David.
Thanks for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure.
No breakfast wine?
Oh, absolutely. With my cornflakes this morning, I had a lovely unoaked Chardonnay. It was a wonderful pairing.
You're full of it. There's no such thing as a breakfast wine, is there?
If you're a wine writer.
Yeah, perhaps. Look, you say in the book, and I like this, how can a person stay fascinated throughout a career with just one drink? It's a good question. Care to answer it?
If you're obsessive compulsive, it's no problem. No, I think what the fascination with wine is that I think it can hit you on three levels. There's the intellectual part, if you want it. Wine is tied to history, culture, geography, science, all that sort of thing. Then there's the sensory level of pairing it with food. What does this wine smell like? How is it different from other wines? And then there is the pure hedonistic buzz. Wine has alcohol. It's the reason we don't have orange juice critics. So I think that total engagement is what makes it so fascinating.
It's the reason we don't have orange juice critics. Look, is it... I like this because, I think about the buzz of wine, and there's at the end of a day, I'm telling you, there's nothing nicer waiting for you than a nice glass. You write rapturously in the book about meeting people along the way. You meet Giuseppe below Mount Etna in Italy, an 11th generation wine grower. Are those the kinds of stories connected to wineries and regions that really suck you in as you travel?
Absolutely. I tried to seek out the most provocative, colorful, memorable characters, winemakers, who I could find in the world of wine. And I think in telling their story, tell the story of wine more interestingly. Because I think you need to be, when it comes to a wine book, you need to be entertained or you're not going to stick with it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to just throw out, here are 30 wines and their tasting notes. I wanted to give people, if I could, rollicking good stories that would keep them entertained. And then when they finish the book, they go, wow, I feel like I learned a lot about wine. And so that was the approach. I was looking for those fascinating people in the world of wine.
When you think about wine tasters, wine connoisseurs, and the traditional image that comes to mind, you see, some guy in a cardigan and a tie, perhaps swirling it around in a glass. You see a lot of men in your mind. As you travel the world, as you go to these old wineries, guys like Giuseppe or people you met in South Africa, wherever, how do they respond when, an attractive blonde walks in with a big personality and says, I want to try your wine?
Thank you. It's very disarming, which is great because they just open up, and it's a much better interview. They're very revealing, and some are quite randy. But it makes for
there is wine involved after all.
I know that's true, but you want that. You want them to feel at ease, and I wanted to know them as people, and so I was very privileged to be able to sit at their dining room tables or in their kitchens and just share stories. I loved it.
I can only imagine. Look, one thing I love in the book is all your insider tips. At the end of each chapter, you have your field notes from a wine cheapskate.
Right.
You're speaking directly to me when you write that. Can you share a few with us? I pulled a few out just as an example, and one that we talked about earlier, but I didn't give a reason for. Look for labels with illegible Gothic script. What's that all about?
Exactly. Well, if you can find wines that are hard to pronounce, the names and so on, I think of Germany. German Rieslings have come a long way, and so they're terrific. They're dry these days. But the insider tip to find bargains is go for the labels that other people can't even interpret. Get familiar with those wines, and I have put a list of them at the back of the chapter on Germany so that you've got your shopping list. The other insider tip that relates to that is find a region that had a dismal reputation 10, 20 years ago. The pink syrupy stuff behind the high school portable, that German Riesling. It's changed completely. And so German Rieslings today are well made. They are dry. I mean, you can get the sweet version, but that's what you're looking for.
So go after your parents' wine because it tastes better than when your parents drank it?
Exactly. There's all kinds of things that are happening these days. Another tip would be go south. Yeah. So in France, you're going to pay a big time for Bordeaux and Burgundy. Go down to the Languedoc or the Provence for the dry rosés. You will save that way.
I like that, and it's your general theme. Check your perceptions about which regions can make wine, because there are wines from parts of the world you wouldn't naturally think of. One of the best I've had in the last year, oddly enough, came from a winery up in the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon. It was a delightful wine from these ancient Roman grapes. Things that you wouldn't usually suspect, and you usually get a better price, don't you?
Exactly. Lesser-known regions and lesser-known grapes. So Cabernet and Chardonnay, another example. You're going to pay up. Those are brand-name grapes. But if you go for Nero d'Avola from Sicily, Carmenere from Chile, Malbec from Argentina, that's where you're going to save as well.
All right. I like your food pairings suggestions as well, because that's also through the book. This is, I think, a pretty good tip for folks out there. Look for food and wine that grew up together in the same region. Explain that.
Well, often there are similar influences on the food and wine, whether it's the soil or the tastes and flavors that will come through in the food. If you think of Italian food and Italian wine, they seem to be made for each other, but they were because if you take the pasta sauce and the zesty flavors that can come through in that, or lasagna, and then look at their reds. They're very mouth-watering, they're juicy, they're full-bodied and robustly flavored. So people have learned over time in that region how to pair their cuisine with their wines, but also the soil, the weather, everything kind of fits together.
But you don't have to do that.
No,
let's say you love Greek lamb and you hate Retsina. You don't have to make your guests drink Retsina.
Absolutely not. No, it's an open field these days.
I kind of like it. It's the pine salt thing. Anyway, now you actually, and this gets me because people wine. It's a snooty profession. People will give you all the rules that you can and can't do. You put an ice cube in your wine.
I know.
You
I didn't know you'd say that on air.
Well, you put it in the book. It's your own fault. Wouldn't connoisseurs condemn you for putting an ice cube in your wine?
Yes, and I hope they just stay far away. I think there's too many rules and traditions and so on. I mean, wine is fascinating for that reason, but we get too caught up with the right wine, the right pairing, and how to serve it. But where I was suggesting the ice cube was with rosé, and a nice dry rosé on a summer's day. You want refreshment, and it's not going to ruin the taste. It's not there to analyze. So go ahead, throw an ice cube in it.
All right. This is the time of year where people are thinking about buying more wine than usual because we're heading up into the holidays and Christmas parties and all that kind of stuff. Do you recommend going in and buying a case? Is that for you the best way to buy wine if you're just somebody who wants to, have a lot on hand?
Absolutely. So you sort of de-risk the stress of the situation of finding that one perfect bottle. So go in, get a mixed case, try lots of different wines. And if you have a starting point, don't be afraid to say something to the staff person inside the liquor store. Just say, I like a full-bodied red that's, maybe $10, $15. That's my budget. What do you suggest? And then maybe you can do that game of if you like this, you'll like that sort of thing.
Natalie, it's an enjoyable, tipsy read.
Thank
you very much for coming in. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And if your listeners are thirsty, they can also find more wine picks on my website at nataliemclean.com.
Well done. The book is called Unquenchable, A Tipsy Quest for the World's Best Bargain Wines. Natalie McLean, thanks again for joining us.